I've got these 18-year-olds that chat to me on TikTok about, hey, I want to be a builder, I want to be a GC. If you're super young and you're 18, you want to be a general contractor, I would say to you this: you've got a shit ton to learn and you're not going to learn it in 5 minutes. How old are you going to be before you start to experience life like you want it? I want to tell you right now, whether you like it or not, there is a better way to do business. Hi everyone, welcome to the Business for Builders podcast. My name's Max. I'm the CEO at Smith & Sons here. Look, I hope you're having a good day. Thanks for joining with us. Look, as usual, like and subscribe and share and comment and all those good things. If you're watching us on YouTube, awesome. Welcome to the podcast. If you're just listening to us cruising down the highway, also I'd like to welcome, for the first time, we are running TikTok Live. So if you're catching this on a podcast or on YouTube, you should check out the Business for Builders podcast. Business for Builders TikTok, and you'll get a bit of a laugh out of that because we do some different stuff on that platform. Informative, educative, and entertaining, maybe all at the same time, which is kind of what we want to do. We're enjoying as well. We're really enjoying the TikTok lives that we're doing. Usually we do those on a Friday afternoon about 3:30 Vancouver time, so Pacific Standard Time. We're going to run those regularly, and then we normally shoot this podcast at this time every Tuesday, which is roughly a 10 or 11 o'clock shoot, and we're going to run TikTok Live as well. So at the end of this podcast, we're going to actually dive into some Q&A if we've got it, and we'll wrap up this episode on the podcast by doing answering the Q&A, which I think is going to be really cool. So if you've got any questions that relates to anything general contractor or even subcontractor questions, retail, general contracting, or renovations, that sort of thing, we'd love it if you would jump on and shoot us some Q&A, and we'll wrap up this podcast answering some of those questions. That'd be super. Okay, so real quick, what we're going to do is lead out today. We've had a little bit of interaction on TikTok, and it's been good. We find it a really good interactive platform. And there's been some confusion around some of the stuff that I've been commenting on or making reference to, or some of the content we're producing. And I'm going to run through a bit of that today and just try and clarify some of the basic fundamentals that, we're making some fairly broad comments on, and really dive into some of the micro detail perhaps. And this, if you're watching us live on TikTok, then this could be, your questions might revolve around, some of this content. Now, what I want to get stuck into first is the difference between a fixed expense and a cost of goods sold. I assume that it was fairly obvious as to what that was, but based on some of the interaction that we've had, in the last week, say, or the last 5 days, it's not as obvious. Now, the reason we want to split up fixed expenses and cost of goods sold is essentially your fixed expenses are what it costs you to run the business, keep the lights on. Things like your gas expenses, your cell phone, your insurances, your stationery. If you're in an office, it's your office expenses. Anything that basically runs, helps to run your business. That's really got nothing to do with what happens on the job sites or within any of the project budget estimates or anything like that. So, what we want to do is, and look, I talk about knowing your numbers within a business, right? So sometimes what can happen is, as a percentage point of your revenue, which is what something you've got to identify. In some cases, you're spending too much money. I'd call it you're being top heavy. You might have too many staff. You might have a fancy office, but you're only doing, $200,000 a year, and you can't justify that fixed expense, right? And in some cases, you're trading out of your basement, your office there, and you're doing $2.5 million a year, and you're doing so much work on your own. You could invest in some human resource. You could invest in maybe an office. Like there's a balance, there's a game, and you've got to analyze it because A, we're all different types of people, and B, we all run a different type of business, and the demands placed on us and our businesses are all varied. They're very different from operator to operator. So you've got to understand that, as a percentage of your perspective or your revenue that you'd like to achieve, you've then got to calculate what your fixed expenses should be to be able to to be able to handle that level of business, right? So you don't want to be too top heavy with an oversupply of fixed expenses that are basically you're just spending money on fixed expenses and you're not invoicing, your receivables aren't good enough. But then again, you don't want to have high receivables and good money and you're not allocating some of that budget to take the load off yourself. So the fixed expenses, let's say, are on the left-hand side of the page. They're everything that comes with running your business. Now, cost of goods sold, right? Cost of goods sold are literally anything that you might have allocated to actually do the project. So let's say you're doing a bathroom or a kitchen, any of those trades and supplies, anything that needs to be supplied, delivered, and installed on that project to complete or to fulfill your obligations as it relates to the project, that is what we call cost of goods sold. So what does it cost me to have the demolition done? What about the debris disposal? What about any abatement that's got to go on? What about any security fencing? What about the installation of signage, temporary signage on that? Anything that goes into the project to help you move towards delivering that project in its entirety, that is a cost of goods sold. So it's very different. So what you do is when you're going back, you're going to do an estimate where you're going to create the budget. And then off the back of the budget, you're going to go and spend the money in real time on delivering that project at the end of the day. And that's where you should be comparing, what you budgeted versus what you spent. That's on top of the budget. Let's say you allowed, $20,000 for your straight cost of goods sold. Then you'll want to apply a markup percentage. Then that is supposed to cover your fixed expenses. And so that really does articulate the difference between fixed expenses and the cost of goods sold. Now, fixed expenses will also include your wage or your salary. You've got to have that. If you're going to run a legitimate business, you can't just say, well, we made $40,000 profit. I worked on the tools and you didn't allocate yourself a wage within your fixed expense calculation. Somewhere in there, he has to allow, because if you want to be a business operator, eventually you've got to keep stepping away from the front line on the job site. So like for me as a carpenter, if you're used to doing the demolition and the framing, and then you'll, oversee how the utilities and all the rough-ins are being done, and then you go and do the boarding, and then you get a mudding tape, like we enjoy that. I get it. We're tradespeople, so we enjoy creating and making. But if we want to be a business owner and get some lifestyle based on our ability to develop a business system in the construction sector, we've got to start thinking about things differently. And so, we've got to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. More importantly, we've got to make sure that the business is taking care of the company owner. That's the idea, right? So a part of your fixed expenses would be an admin person. It might be, marketing. That might be something that you're either doing in-house with someone or you're outsourcing. That's a fixed expense. It's got nothing to do with renovating a kitchen or a bathroom or building a custom home. It's separate. And so it's super important that we understand what the cost of goods sold are and how they look in comparison to your fixed expenses. So when you create a budget for a kitchen renovation, then it might be, $40,000 worth of cost. Then you've got to allocate a markup where I can do that renovation in, let's say, 6 weeks all up, or 8 weeks, whatever the case is, depending on your supply chain issues. That means I'm going to have to mark it up, 40 or 45%, whatever works for you. I know that for our guys in the Smith & Sons group, we're marking up renovations up to about 45%. That's what we do on all cost of goods sold. And so, that's where you want to make sure that the profit, the gross profit that you're generating off the back of those budgeted cost of goods sold is going to be enough to be able to cover your monthly fixed expenses. Now, you can, and this is where I'm going to go to next. It's all about creating profit in the build process. And so let's say you had a $40,000 kitchen, let's say you had a kitchen renovation that had a cost of goods sold budget of $40,000. And then we apply, let's say, a 40% markup on that. That would be another $16,000 on top of that. So essentially that's a $56,000 contract plus tax, obviously. So what I want to make sure is that $16,000 going to be enough to cover my business expenses, including my salary, for the time that it takes to build that renovation? So if it's a 2-month project, is $16,000 going to be enough? Now, I can't make you any recommendations because I don't know you or your business or your ability to deliver. But it's some things to think about when it comes to putting those quotes together. Because when you're quoting, it's, in real estate, there's a saying, you don't make your money when you sell, you make your money when you buy. Well, I want to tell you that in construction, specifically in renovations and probably custom homes as well, you don't make your money when you build. You make your money when you close that contract. And so you'd want to make sure that all your numbers in your estimates are spot on. And this is why I say that profit is a natural byproduct of good estimating. Now, further to that, profit is also a byproduct of your ability to deliver and to manage the project at a high level. If you're disorganized, I don't know. I would expect that most guys and gals who run a general contracting company right now and are listening to this, they would work like more than just 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Now, if you're a veteran of the game and you've got a big business, then there's a reason why you're working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. But if you're a startup and you're new at the game, then obviously you're going to have to invest a lot more time to get the output. So for me, running a startup, and I'd been in the building game 30 years before I got this gig with Smith & Sons. Still to this day, literally, I was in the office Saturday and Sunday. Now, we're training new salespeople tomorrow, so I was investing time to make sure, and I was being diligent to make sure. But the same goes for you as well. Like if you've got a meeting with a client, in 2 days' time, you've got to make sure that your budget's good. You got to make sure that your presentation ready to go. You got to make sure all the specifications are catered for. You got to make sure your numbers, and you might be doing this on 3 or 4 fronts because you might have 4 or 5 proposals happening at the same time. And you've got to be, then you've also got 3 projects on the go and you've got 2 full-time carpenters working for you. Like this is where, I think that as an individual, you got to know your limitations. Because I'm just talking about a couple of basic fundamentals like fixed expenses and cost of goods sold and creating profit from the build schedule. And all of a sudden, you can find yourself, if you do good work, this is what can happen. You can get referral business, and that's frigging awesome. But I need you to learn to say no or waiting list. Those 2 things. If you've got a really high level or a lot of inquiry, you have the luxury, because you're doing really good work, you have the luxury to qualify hard. Or you might want to increase your markup a couple of points because now you're in demand. So if you are going to mitigate and regulate, then part of that process is definitely in how many points you're marking up and your ability to at least speak and communicate well with clients and say, look, I'm really in a position where, matter of fact, I talked to 2 guys. One guy's like, I'm busy. I don't need any more inquiry for 2 more months. I've got another guy saying I'm going to be busy till Christmas. I've got 2 of my and then I've got one guy who's actually throwing into spring next year. And so this is all about lead management and really client management as well. So, but going back to creating profit. So we know that we've got $40,000 worth of cost on this kitchen reno. We know that we're going to allocate, 40% markup. There might be a touch more there if you're good enough. And we're talking about now 16 grand. Is it enough? Well, that's up to you and your business. You got to do the analysis and figure out what it is that your business requires on a weekly, monthly basis to figure out, well, I could actually just do one job and that 16,000 profit for 2 months is actually more than enough. And that's up to you to do the analytics. Now, that tells me, if you're not happy with that and you go, Max, I need way more than that, it's a simple, basic mathematical process where you go, well, I need to be closing this many deals per month. So in 3 months, I've got this much revenue being generated off the back of milestones that I'm achieving in my projects. Now, it's what I know is that it's not a case of one-to-one. Like there's so many parts of this business that affect each of the parts. It's so interdependent that you can't just think modifying one thing is going to then be enough to actually win the game. You've got to be, it's very fluid and it happens very simultaneously, and you've got to have your eyes on the whole process. It is like trying to round up kittens, to be honest. So this is where your ability to analyze comes into it. It's like, okay, what's my, how many leads a month? What sort of lead value, Dom, can I have a water? What sort of lead value has got to be generated per month to, so, and if I said to you, look, your average conversion rate should be on gross numbers, should be about 25%. So if I get 100 inquiries this month, I should be converting 25 of those to jobs. Now, if you're not, there's a problem with if you're not getting 100 leads, there's a problem with your marketing. If you're not converting 25% of your gross lead count, then there's something wrong with your sales process. I hope I said that right. So if you're not getting the appropriate amount of leads, then it's got something to do with your marketing and your marketing message. And if you're not converting 25% as a minimum of your gross amount of leads, then there's something wrong with the sales process. I'll take it one step further. We look at the bid to win ratio. And so it's like, how many quotes did I present and how many of those quotes did I convert to projects, right? I would say to you that on that, you should be converting 50 to 75% as a minimum as well. If you're, what you've got to have is good top of funnel. You've got to be then focusing. You've got to qualify hard-ish, okay? Now, your situation's different. Don't go throwing up on me. I get it. Everybody's different, which is why that when we have a brand new Smith & Sons general contractor climb aboard and join forces with the Smith & Sons brand, we want to analyze their situation individually and them as a person to figure out what their onboarding first 90-day process looks like and then what their overall 12-month goal would be. And then we reverse engineer that and we try and make sure that we customize the onboarding and the first 12 months in accordance with, their ability to operate. And so 50 to 75% bid to win ratio, I think you can nudge that a little bit higher, 75 to 85%. And the reason is because once we get into a quote, we don't quote for free, right? So if you're sitting there and you're just spinning your wheels, quoting, and I remember I did this, I would do my own marketing. I'd spend $1,200. This is 10 years ago. I would do my own marketing. Actually, it's more than that. It's 10 to 12. And I was doing my own marketing and I was spending $1,200. I was putting 20,000 brochures in letterbox. I wasn't doing it. I had a company doing it. And we would give anybody a quote. And I wasn't charging for that. And yet I had a buddy of mine who was doing it. He was my estimator and he was busy there sitting, pumping out estimates. We weren't qualifying and we weren't charging to quote. Those are the two things that I think can break your back. Where you put yourself under an enormous amount of pressure because you don't qualify and you don't charge to quote. Now, do I go to clients when they first come in, hey, you're going to have to pay me to quote? No, I do not. You know why? Because the client perceives no value. And so what you've got to do is you've got to repackage what we do in the quoting process to be able to present it to a client which represents value to them. In other words, yes, I'm willing to pay for that service, Max. That's excellent. And so that's why we have a 75 to 85 bid to win. In some cases, one of my guys, because we have this service that we offer to be able to, create budgets and go to, do all of the architecturals and everything like that. It's almost like a preliminary build contract, but it's all the work that you need to do in order to get to the final price. And then if that's all satisfactory and we've got all the specifications organized, and the build time is suitable to the clients, then we move into the full-blown fixed-price building contract. So, it's really a case of ascertaining what it is that the client is wanting and deliver it to them at a high level. That's the delivery of value. So, I think sometimes that, we are our own worst enemy. Like I was doing, spending $1,200 delivering to 20,000 households and, spinning my wheels quoting. You can't just go and say, I need to charge you to do this quote because the client doesn't get it and they don't see it. You've got to help present the value. So look, I think I've sort of digressed there for a second, but yeah, the other thing you've got to do, how do you know what money you're making when you're looking at your budget for the estimate and your actuals? If you're not comparing the budgets in other words, if you're not tracking the spend on a project, how are you ever going to know whether you're a good estimator or not? How do you know where you're losing money? How do you know if you're actually making money? I'll tell you when you'll know is when you get to the back end of a 12-month and you do your year end and your accountant says to you, actually, you're losing money, bro, or you're not making money. That's when you figure it out. Now, all that 12 months operation is all gone. We assess profit and loss and balance sheets on a monthly basis, but we really do some double down assessment on a quarterly basis because in the building game, to assess how a building company is going, there's a long tail on sales, so it's very tricky to sort of figure out where a building company's up to in a 30-day snapshot. But what we can do is we can start establishing trends on how it's going. Do we have a positive trajectory or do we have a negative trajectory? So just to wrap up the creating profit budget for actuals, I'll give you a story. One of the largest projects that I did, it was a 5-plex. It was a $1.1 million project. And I might have shared this in a TikTok live last week. But, what I did was we went to contract at about 1.1, and my estimator come to me 3 weeks in because he's starting to do a lot of these preliminary orders and, figuring out, what we got in the way of stock and starting to schedule those orders. And he come to me cap in hand and said, Max, I've forgotten to include the ceramic tiles for this project. Turns out that was about a $7,500 to $8,500 oversight. And, we're so early on in the build, and this might help you understand what I'm talking about when you do have a budget set and then you go to build where you can make money while you're building. Now, we all know that you can lose money. In other words, I allowed $10,000 for an electrician and he cost me $12,000 and I've lost money. Now, if you do a cost of goods sold, that's not the same vulnerability as what you've got when you fix price, right? Because you just go, well, I budgeted for 10 and it cost me 12 grand. Now I go to the client and just tell them it's 12 grand plus my management fee and you're good. If you're a real professional, what you'll do is you will go to fixed price contracts. And then it's in the fixed price contract build. And I've had someone say to me on TikTok, look, mate, no, thanks, I'm not doing that. And I totally respect that. And that's cool, right? But what I do know is that if I can sell professionally at a high level and I can have a budget established, and let's say it was $10,000 for an electrician, but I've been able to get that electrical work done, it's more probably in the procurement of materials. It's not necessarily going to be trades, because inevitably you're going to get quotes from trades. And so there's a little bit of, sometimes you can do your estimates by getting quotes, which takes a bit of time. The other thing you might be able to do is use the rates for your subcontractors, right? So what I do sometimes is I'm like, I know roughly that this electrical is going to cost me 10 grand. And this is where, if you're in fixed price and I've budgeted 10 grand for an electrical component for that project, and because I've taken a risk and I've added contingencies to my electrical scope of work, and then my final invoice from my electrician is only 8.5 grand, then I've made money. Now, this is the risk that you take. This is not a perfect science. You've got to know your shit. This is why, I love these guys. I've got these 18-year-olds that chat to me on TikTok about, hey, I want to be a builder, I want to be a GC. Let me just digress or pivot and talk to these guys and gals. If you're super young and you're 18, you want to be a general contractor, I would say to you this: you've got a shit ton to learn and you're not going to learn it in 5 minutes. The reason I got into construction, because I wasn't a very good student, which meant I wasn't going to go and dive into books and the academic side of it as quickly as what I would hands-on, which means you're going to learn on the job as you go. And therefore, you need to apply a certain amount of patience. So, I think what you need to be as a good student of the business, you need to pay attention to both the good things that guys on job sites say and the bad things. Look for the consistency, especially when you're talking to old boys like me that are all bitching about the same thing. They're hating the subcontractor issue, the supply chain's right. I hate clients. All clients are dickheads. They give me a hard time and I don't like it. So, what you need to do is open your eyes. You've got 2 ears, 1 mouth. Ask a few questions, but listen a lot. If you're an 18-year-old, 20-year-old, and you want to get into the general contractor world, you've got plenty of time. If you're friggin' 20 and I'm 50, I'm 30 years ahead of you, you could cock it up for 10 years and still have 20 years to fix it all. So it's not a bad thing. So, answering some of those questions about what do I do most, it's all about education. The more I go, the more I understand how much I don't know. And so if I'm an 18, 20-year-old, I would just say you've got time and just focus on learning. Focus on looking for the consistencies in the things guys are doing right, and focus on the consistency in the things that, guys are doing wrong. So you can figure out your way through. It's no different. Like, I'm the eldest of 6 kids, and I look at my baby brother, and he's 9 years my junior. And I reckon he's had a cruisy life, because he's watched all of us older brothers, and there's 4 of us, just cock it up completely and make a friggin' royal mess out of it. And so, I think that there's some wisdom that you can gain if you're aware. Look, okay, don't be in a hurry. So hopefully someone out there, is going to get a hold of that and sort of understand. So be patient. There's so much learning to be done, and you just can't download all of that in one, 5-minute special. You can't just watch one documentary or listen to one podcast and get that. It's all about going out, learning, implementing, then assessing, and then making sure that next time round you're going to do it as well or better. And if you've made some errors, you make sure you make a note of those, and you really figure out what you can do better going around next time. So that's it. I know I'm sort of all over the shop a little bit, but the last thing I want to talk about is the concept of default or design. I talk about this concept because, like I think in the last podcast or the one before, I talked about, is your communication or is your management happening by is it happening by design or is it happening by default? And so what I mean by that is that, you've got to, you don't just, if you're not going out there and say, let's talk about management, managing all your systems within your business. Have you got systems in your business, whether you like it or not? It's a question, have you designed those systems or is it by default? In other words, you haven't actually given it some deep thought. You're just busy out there implementing and trying to survive. Now, here's another one. Do you have a sales process that's by design or by default? So I would say this, are the clients buying in accordance with, are you selling in accordance with the client's buying process, or are you selling to the clients in accordance with your buying process? In other words, when we have clients come in, this is where we go. These are what we call the gates and tripwires. I guess I could get questions about that too if I'm not careful, but gates and tripwires, because that we have a sales process set up where we have everything from the marketing, let's say, which is the messaging. But once we get an inquiry that comes into our head office here, or it comes in via our contact form on our website, all of our operators are trained to sell in a certain way and to set up the gates and the tripwires to ensure that we're spending the time with the most appropriate type of client that's going to give us the best bang for our buck. And so, what we want to do is our time, we've got to understand that our time is absolutely gold and that we can't afford to just mismanage our time. We've got to make sure that we're using our time to the best that we can, because you'll never get today back again. And so, like I was doing 10 years ago, getting my estimator to do 50 quotes a week, and I never qualified them really well. And I wasn't charging, for that quoting service, if you like. That was a massive error on my part, because I spent a shit ton of money when I shouldn't have been if I had a system. So I had a sales system 12 years ago, or 10 to 12 years ago, that was by default. I was doing what I thought was good. Now, you're out there listening to this podcast or watching this on TikTok or YouTube, and you're nodding your head going, well, yeah, man, I'm doing the best. Like, nobody's actually trained me. Now, 10 years ago, the YouTube content wasn't there like it is today. There's certainly, the word podcast was not even in the vernacular. And so your ability to get good quality information, in some cases, I know there's probably some sketchy shit going on out there, but it's really available to you as a general contractor and operator to really get your head around how to go about establishing systems where you can actually have some influence there and design those systems, rather than just keep putting one foot in front of the other and never quitting. There's a saying that says, in some cases, guys and girls, you've got to, dismount. The horse is dead. Like, sometimes you guys and gals, and me included, like I was 10 years ago, we're just whipping this horse because that's our process. And we think, well, this is all we know. We're just going to keep doing it. But the horse is dead. Dismount, And so really, what I need you to do today, I think, based on, all of the stuff that we just talked about, from fixed expenses to cost of goods sold, to creating profit, doing audits on all your different processes, and thinking about designing stuff instead of just running with this. I don't even know how I come up with the system. It's just what I've been doing. That's a default. It just happened automatically without your influence. Then I think you need to do an audit on your whole building company. Matter of fact, right now, I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'll tell you what I'm working on right now. And this started because, I was working on just revamping the project consultant sales training, which I'm going to carry out in the next 48 hours, is, I was really motivated around doing quality assurance checklists. Sometimes it's like, well, that's a bit of an overkill for a bathroom. I don't know if it is. I think there's going to be variations. I think I'm not going to do one quality assurance, checklist system. I will do a quality assurance checklist system for new homes, and then kitchens, and then bathrooms, and then full-blown, full gut renos, and then additions. But I think that's so for me, even doing this for so long, I'm still going, I really need to give my guys some tools and some resources that are really going to help my general contractors be more diligent throughout the build. So always the challenge we have is at the handover, or the substantial completion, or the practical completion stage, which is at the back end, and that's where you have trouble getting the final payment as well. So I'm wanting to put in more systems on top of what we're doing to ensure that we're good to go as we go through the stages, because then if all of that proactivity culminates at the end, it will be positive. And of course, the whole closeout process of that contract, getting to a certificate of completion, get an occupancy certificate, those things like that are all going to be a lot more fluid into that closeout. And so that's what I do. I'm sitting here going, well, I need to improve my systems. Now, if it's good enough for me to do that, and any operator that's out there that's really kicking ass in this game, I guarantee you that's the same mindset. You need to be able to sort of look at your, let's say, smaller business or your startup business and understand the concept around design versus default. Do not get into a business and I want you to design and even redesign. Sometimes I've done this. 2 years ago, I guarantee you there's systems in my business that are different. They're not the same. They're different today than what they were 2 years when I first developed them. And so that's what you've always got to be doing. You've got to plan, do, check, and go around that and make sure that you're implementing some and I think that'll help you, because systems will give you leverage. Leverage is what you need to give you back some lifestyle. And ultimately, I love the fact that I can, run my own business and work in my own office and do my thing. But there's a part of me too that just like to wake up on a Wednesday and go, you know what? I'm going to put my pontoon boat in the lake and I'm just going to go and sit out there and drink lemonades. And have a good time. So, I think we want to balance. You want the time to spend the money and the money to spend the time. You don't want to be, nose to the grindstone, building a business that set you up for failure. That's if you don't do it by design and you do it by default, what you'll find is one day you'll wake up and you go, this business is a shit show. It's not working out for me. I don't know what went wrong. That is a really dark day, because odds on is you're not going to be able to recover. You're too deep. You're into a nose down negative trajectory death spiral. And for you to pull out, you'd want to have some savage altitude. And altitude in this business equals cash at bank. Cash. You've heard the saying that revenue is vanity, profit is sanity. If you're not making money, then it's only a matter of time and you'll run out of altitude, or you'll stick it in the side of a friggin' mountain and it'll be game over and you'll be back to doing something else, on the tools working for somebody else. So keep all that in mind. So look, thanks for joining us on the podcast today. Like I said before, go build a kick-ass business. We'll see you on the next episode. Cheers.